Prologue. Sweat dripped off my right eyebrow, down my cheek, into the corner of my mouth. My partner was pushing me from behind into the raging fire. This was one of the hottest fires I've ever been in. I had a tight grip on the 1.5-inch fog nozzle as we crawled deeper into the 3-bedroom home. We could feel the flames licking all around us and hear the crackling and popping sounds of the house that was being devoured. The smoke was so thick that through my mask I could not see my hand in front of my face. All we could see was the ominous orange-red glow of the fire in every direction. The 40 pounds of equipment I was wearing, SCBA, self-contained breathing apparatus, breathing mask, fire turnout gear, and various other equipment, was starting to tire me out. Suddenly, I was no longer feeling the presence of my partner behind me. I reached for him, but he was gone. I turned slightly to look back, only to see the deadly glow of fire in every direction, now blocking my only escape route. There was orange above me, orange to the right of me, orange to the left of me, behind me, and even below me. The red-hot embers on the floor were starting to burn my knees through my rubber boots. I tried to get up off the floor a bit, but the superheated gases around my head instantly burned my ears. I could feel the skin starting to peel, so I dropped back down to my knees. They would just have to burn. I sprayed water all around, but it seems to make little difference. The glow above made me wonder how long before the ceiling would collapse. The sponginess beneath my hands and knees told me that there was a good chance this floor could cave in. For the first time since becoming a firefighter, I was starting to wonder if I would get out of this one. For a split second, I wondered if I'd ever see my family again. Then my training kicked in, and I refocused my efforts on vigorously spraying water in every direction. Finally, the orange started to fade, the heat began to decrease, and even the thick smoke was thinning out. Across the room, I could see my fellow firefighters putting out the dying embers of the blaze. At last I could get up off my burnt knees. As I staggered to my feet, I realized I was in a kitchen. There wasn't much left. Charred remains of the cabinets and unrecognizable globs of plastic on the blackened countertop were all that remained of a family's kitchen. A burnt-out shell filled with black piles of smoky-smelling, worthless junk. As I made my way out of the ruin, I could see that the rest of the house was in relatively good shape apart from the smoke damage. The once white walls were now gray from the floor to about 4 feet up, becoming blacker closer to the ceiling. Because the temperature was much higher near the ceiling, the paint was cracked and bubbled. As I walked out of the house, I noticed one more thing. I saw what must have been a wall-mounted telephone about 4 feet off the ground. Now it was just a hardened stream of melted plastic dripping down to the floor. The heat of the flames transformed even the most mundane household objects into useless, charred remains. I turned and walked out. My fire was over. Chapter 1. Day in, day out. When I emerged from the house, the captain ordered me to report to the paramedics to be checked out. They took my vitals, blood pressure, pulse, respiration, and then bandaged my knees and ears. I was then ordered to be taken to the hospital ER. On the way there, the paramedics and I talked about the fire. "That was a real hot one, huh?" John commented. "Yes, it was," I answered. "I have never burnt my knees before. This should be a good case for bunker pants." "We should be getting them next week," John replied. We turned into the hospital driveway. Once we were inside, the ER doctor put Silvadine on my ears and knees and bandaged them up. He finished with an energetic, "You can go back to work now." "Thanks a lot," I said sarcastically. When we arrived back at Station 4 on Hiller and Greer, the engine was already cleaned and the fire hose was packed. Getting the engine back in service after a fire was my least favorite thing, so I was glad that it was done. I had been assigned to drive the rescue that day. The rescue was a paramedic truck that was a bit larger than an ambulance. The department used it for medical runs, rescues, and fires. In some fire departments, assignments are the same each day. At ours, however, roles change regularly. "Dinner's on," said Ray, the watchman of the day. We took turns being on watch, and one of the duties was to cook the meals. The delicious smell of baked chicken greeted me as I sat down at the table. "Sorry I left you in the fire. I had to get out," Mike said sheepishly as he sat down next to me. "I'm not as young as I used to be," he said. He was older than the rest of us and a bit out of shape. The heat of the fire had been too much for him. I assured him it was all right. Everything had worked out. I had just reached for the mashed potatoes when the station alert tone screamed. Everyone groaned and started to rise from the table. The dispatcher announced, "Station 4, you have a car versus truck PIA, personal injury accident, with injuries on Haggerty and Pontiac Trail. Timeout 1923. That's 7:23. We all scrambled out the door to the apparatus room where the EMS, Rescue 4, and Engine 4 vehicles were waiting. I grabbed my turnout gear and I put it in the back of the rescue and went around to the driver's side. I got in and started the diesel as Jerry climbed into the passenger side. The engineer driving Engine 4 flipped on the master switch of the control panel. Red and yellow emergency lights began to flash. Jerry turned on our lights as well, adding to the cacophony of lights flooding the apparatus room. Engine 4 pulled out of the apparatus room onto the driveway. I could hear the diesel engine growling and smelled the fumes as I drove the rescue behind the big vehicle. The sirens wailed and the air horns bellowed as we followed the engine onto Hiller Road. It was almost pitch dark outside now, our red and yellow lights reflecting back at us off the shiny wet blacktop. Over the radio I heard the officer in Engine 4 saying, "Engine 4, Rescue 4 responding." "Message received," Engine 4, Rescue 4 responding. repeated the female dispatcher. As we gained speed, the adrenaline shot through my veins. I hope it's nothing serious, said Jerry. I would like to be able to eat sometime tonight. Yeah, that would be nice, I agreed. The apprehension I was feeling didn't really have to do with my waiting dinner. I just don't like car accidents. As we raced down Pontiac Trail, heading west towards the accident at Haggerty, a male dispatcher called. Engine 4, Rescue 4, police are on the scene. They report very serious injuries and would like you to step it up. Message received, dispatch, Jerry answered. So much for dinner, we both said at the same time. We really could not step it up because traffic was starting to back up. Soon it came to a dead stop. We pulled the engine and the rescue around the stopped traffic into the oncoming lane. Most of the cars pulled off the road so we could get through. There it is, I called out. It's a bad one, all right, said Jerry, as we pulled up closer. I could see the blue flashing lights of the 3 police cars parked around the scene. I pulled the rescue up as close as possible. The engine drove past to the other side of the accident in order to stretch an 1.5-inch line, just in case of a fire. As we came to a stop, I could see what looked like the frame of a car, just the frame. The rest of the mangled body had been thrown about 50 yards down Haggerty Road. It looked as though someone had ripped the car's body off the chassis, crumbled it up into a ball, and tossed it away like an unwanted toy. About 25 yards further on was a large gray recycled oil tanker laying on its side in a field. As we got out of the rescue, I saw 3 people in the car still buckled into their seats, which were still securely fixed to the car's frame. We moved closer to the eerie scene and saw that the seats were broken, laying back flat, with the passengers still buckled in tightly. I was soon startled awake by the station tones. The lights in the bunk room flashed on, and everyone sat up. Station 4, you have a possible suicide at 2332 Old Court Trail, the dispatcher announced. The 2 other paramedics and I scrambled to get dressed while the remaining firefighters laid back down. We hurried to the watchroom and looked up the street on the big wall map, while Jerry found the address in the section map. We rapidly calculated the quickest route and hopped into the rescue. This, of course, was before every phone had a built-in GPS map system. The apparatus room door opened and we were on our way. Rescue 4 en route, said Jerry with his mouth against the mic. Rescue 4 en route, repeated the dispatcher. No one said anything on the way to the residence. We turned right onto Old Court Trail. A blue flash in the side view mirror caught my eye. It was a police car pulling up behind us. I slowed down so he could pass. The dispatcher called again. Rescue 4, stage in front of the house. Don't go in until the police secure the scene. Message received, staging in front of the house, Jerry answered. Not long after we stopped, a police officer came walking up to the rescue. Good morning, the officer said. Nice night for a suicide. He did quite a number on himself. He's in his office, just inside the door. He helped us carry the equipment to the house. He's in here. The police officer opened the dark wooden door to his office. We entered the room and found a well-dressed, approximately 45-year-old male leaning back in his office chair. His feet were up on a large, shiny black, expensive-looking oak desk. The desk was very neat with small stacks of official-looking papers in nice rows on either side of a set of gold ink pens. Next to these were his nicely polished shoes. He looked like he just leaned back to relax, only he was obviously dead. His face was ashen gray and his eyes were wide open. In the corner of his mouth was a string of blood dripping to his shoulder. His hands were on his chest clutching something. It was a 12-inch long pearl-handled dagger. It looked as though he had taken the dagger with both hands and slowly pushed the cold steel blade through his chest wall and his heart. The sharp tip of the blade protruded out of his back, with blood dripping onto the chair then down to the wooden floor, forming a puddle. He was still clutching the handle of the dagger. Surprisingly, there wasn't much blood on his chest except for the small red stain on his dress white shirt where the dagger had impaled him. "Try to touch as little as possible, okay?" the police officer directed. "Okay," I said, "but we will have to send an ECG to the hospital." We placed the ECG pads on the dead man's chest. As we expected, the monitor showed flatline. Jerry called the hospital as I hooked the life pack to the radio and transmitted the results to them. The doctor announced time of death as 03:22. The police officer entered the room as I removed the ECG pads.